I've told you which positions I think the Florida Gators should target in the second transfer portal window. Here's who I think they will target.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my road work with Giants Country NFL 33. And today we're talking about what positions I think the Florida Gators will target in the transfer portal. We know what I think they should. Corner is the first thing on there. I don't think that they're going to spend too much time on cornerback in the transfer portal just because, one, they've got the guys in the room that, first off, they've been recruiting. But also, I do think it's kind of hard to find someone that will fit and like be able to evaluate those guys and find out will they fit. I think it's really difficult to do just on defense in general, to have the time to watch and evaluate these players. Go, okay, we value him, we want him. How do we get him on the team? I think that takes a lot of time, and it's really hard to do. I think that when you look at specific positions like receiver, I do think that receiver is one of the spots that is easier to evaluate in the transfer portal, or maybe not easier to evaluate, but it's easier or quicker to recognize this guy's skill set we want, this guy doesn't. I think you can do that a lot quicker, whether or not you think that they're going to be good, whether you put all the context in of like, who did they do this against, all that stuff, a little bit different. But in terms of he has a skill set that we want, you can find that quicker in the transfer portal or quicker at positions like wide receiver. And obviously, it depends on who enters the transfer portal, which opens next week. But we don't really have the answer fully for who enters because a lot of kids wait for the spring game to happen and go, all right, as in for their spring game, for their school to happen. And then they go, all right, I didn't play much in there. Probably a good indicator that I'm not going to play much during the season. Or I balled out in the spring game, but I'm not going to be a starter and I want to be. And so maybe they look at that. So it does depend, but I do feel like receiver is one of those spots where you can find talent there in every portal window. It's just a matter of actually getting there. There's obviously a ton of receivers that tend to hit the portal because every team has 10 to 12 of them and not everybody's going to play, right? And so they try to find spots. For me, the biggest, not issue, but the biggest question, because again, I do think the Florida Gators will look into the transfer portal for another receiver. And you've got good guys in the room right now, like Trey Wilson, obviously very talented. You've got Chimere Dike has great chemistry with Graham Mertz, and he's got fine speed. Andy Jean is someone that I think a lot of us are relatively high on and have expectations, but not proven at this point. And that's also a lot about when you look at the Florida Gators receiver room, is that there's a lot of unproven talent. And so I do think that a big part of adding a receiver in this window will be get someone that's experienced. But again, the thing is, what type of receivers will hit the portal compared to what the Florida Gators coaching staff is looking for in this portal window? Because if a bunch of 6 foot tall 4.35 speed guys hit, which obviously there's not a bunch of that to begin with, but if those are the kinds of guys that hit the portal and Florida's like, oh, we're actually pretty good on that, we want to add a bit more size, whatever it may be. For Florida, like you do have plenty of speed in the receiver room. But do you want more speed? Like, is that the qualifier that you're looking for? Do you feel like you have a bunch of speedy guys, but aren't good receivers? Because we see that all the time. A ton of athletes. And we see this happen a lot in college or high school to college, not too much of college to the NFL, but so much of high school to college is, oh, this guy had 1,600 yards in his senior year of high school, and he was just burning everyone. because that's what you could do. A lot of athletes that we see dominate people at the high school level. And then when it comes time to play college football and it's like, oh, well, now you actually have to run routes and separate. They can't do that. And so maybe that's kind of something that we're getting from this current receiver room. I'm not saying that we are. I'm just saying maybe that's one of the things that's happening, why Florida might look at receiver again for next year. But we could look at guys like Fenley Graham is someone that I think of when we think of like, oh, he's fast, but he's not a good receiver, because Fenley tried that a bit, didn't work out, right? Played corner, didn't work out. Then he went to play receiver at it was Florida A&M, and if I'm not mistaken, still didn't do anything at receiver there. So it's like you can't just be fast. Is that what we're seeing now? I don't know. Maybe the Florida coaching staff feels like that's all they have. Speed with no quality. Which again, speed is fun. Speed is awesome in Madden, and it will be in college football 2025. But I don't think that that's necessarily effective. Do they want size? You only have a couple of guys who are taller than what? 6'2"? It's Aiden Mizell 6'3". Marcus Burke is 6'4". Jaquavian Frazier's is 6'3", 6'4". It's kind of it. You don't have a ton of size in the receiver room. Is that what they're looking for? Are they looking? Because even Khalil Jackson plays like he's 6'4", but he's listed as 6'2", if I'm not mistaken. So it's even like you have guys that can play above the rim, but do you want to get guys who live above the rim? Do you want to get guys who start above the rim? So I think it's very interesting there with what Florida is looking for. And when you talk about who's going to hit the portal and who's going to actually be available and interested in Florida, we talk different. But when we talk about just what you need or what I think the Florida Gators will look for in the portal, in this portal window, receivers are the first thing that comes to mind. Just I think that it's what they're going to do. I don't even know if I would do it if I were on the coaching staff. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable just going, all right, we're going to find a guy this portal class that's going to be able to contribute at receiver right now. I feel like I would personally kind of rather go, all right, we've got a decent bunch. They're young but unproven, but we can figure this out. But again, I'm not in the facility with them for spring practice looking at what these kids are doing. And so maybe they feel differently, but I do think that they're going to look at receiver in this second portal class and try to add just a guy who can be wide receiver 4 or 5 that has experience, probably going to look for some verified speed and probably going to be, I want to say 6'2"-ish, so that he can kind of be an in-between of the size that Florida typically goes for, with like the shorter guys, and have some decent speed, and be the size that is tall for that receiver room. Just get you a little bit taller and be able to do some more work, preferably over the middle of the field there. Think that's what we're going to see at receiver. We are about to talk about, we're talking to all offense for the entirety of this show. But first, a quick word from FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, pun intended, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Guaranteed. It's $150 whether you win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. I'm just donating money to them as I continuously bet Wyatt Langford home run every single game of his career. We'll see how it works in the long run. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win that gives you $150 back in bonus bets. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews of the podcast and on YouTube. And the second position that we're talking about, again, we're going to be on offense this entire show. The second position that we're talking about, interior offensive line. And I say this knowing that I got like 3 or 4 DMs last week just like, hey, man, like this guy's talking about you in the Twitter space. And it's funny that it continuously happens. But some people were really upset with me saying that Damian George, like from things that we've heard and things that not just me, but other people have also reported that Damian George maybe not working out too great at guard either. And I don't know if it was because I tried to tell you, and I will remind you again, that Damian George never played guard in his career. He has practiced at guard, but as far as have you ever in your life played a single snap at the SEC level, at the college level, to any extent, at either left or right guard? The answer is for a fact, no. Damian George has not. He has practiced at guard. That's it. Okay, and I bring that up again because people get so upset because for this whole offseason, people spend time going, Damian George is going to be good at guard. He is a natural at guard. That's his spot. Keep in mind, on this show, Locked On Gators, that's not what we said. We said, we know he's not good at tackle. You think he has to be better at guard because he's so bad at tackle. But if I'm not mistaken, we never said he'd be good at guard. He should theoretically be decent. Power run game, we know he's pretty good at that. But his main issue was pass protection. We've seen people run around him at the college level. We've seen people run through him. And I mean, or not even through him. We saw Jared Verse use him to sack Max Brown in the Florida State game last year. Just threw Damian George into Max Brown and got the sack. We saw that, like with our eyes. Unless, I mean, if you looked at the eclipse yesterday, then you won't be able to see it this year. But we saw that last year, right? So, yeah, maybe he's not going to work out. I'm not writing him off completely, but I will say, again, from things I've heard and things that other people have also reported, Damian George isn't ideal at guard. And Billy Napier has been praising Bryce Lovett, which, good. Bryce Lovett seems like a great kid. Could work out. Is impressing, having a very strong spring. I don't know about you, but like think about it from how I'm going to think about this from Billy Napier, Rob Sale, Jonathan DeCoster's perspective, right? You've got your offensive line group. Most spots are pretty much figured out. And then you've got this one spot at your other guard spot that you're looking at and you go, Damian George isn't fully working out here, might not be fully working out here. Bryce Lovett, impressing this spring. Even myself, who I'm a huge Rod Kearney fan, we'll see what he can do long term. But if you're in the seat of Billy Napier, of Rob Sale, of Jonathan DeCoster, and you go, hey, we need to win football games this year, or there's a pretty good chance and none of us will have a job at the University of Florida in 2025. Do you feel comfortable with Damian George as a redshirt senior at this point, if I'm not mistaken, and hasn't worked out, didn't start at Alabama, started last year and was below average, if you want to even say that? You have to bank on that. Rod Kearney is a redshirt freshman, or Bryce Lovett as a redshirt freshman. And even if you want to say, hey, Bryce Lovett has been really impressing in the spring, on a year or on a season that's going to decide your future, decide your career, do you really want to bank on a redshirt freshman having a strong spring as the thing that can be your Achilles heel the entire year? Or do you want to maybe look into the portal and find a guard who you know can run wide zone, who you know can run a bit of power counter, and can pass protect? I think phrasing it that way makes it pretty clear. Like, I'm not saying that Florida needs to look there. I do think that they should at least look at the offensive line. And if there's talent, there's talent. But I'm not saying they need to. I am saying that I do think it's a position that the Florida Gators will look at in the second transfer portal window next week. Just because it makes sense to me to do that. If the reviews back about Damian George were just stellar throughout, if it was like, oh my God, he's a dog at guard, then we're having a different conversation. But that's not the conversation that we're having right now. The conversation we're having right now is that, hey, maybe he's just not it. Hey, this redshirt freshman's playing really well this spring. Hey, do we want to bank on that being maybe one of the most glaring weaknesses on the team when we've got this second portal window to maybe address that? I think you do, right? I think you do address that. So I think Florida is going to look for an interior offensive line in this second portal window. Now, one more position to talk about to wrap up today's show, and it's going to be one of my favorite positions. I want you to know that, and you might have a clue to it because I did talk about this one a couple of weeks ago. But first, a quick word from a couple sponsors. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, which, by the way, let me know what positions you think Florida will target in the second transfer portal window, and or positions you think Florida should target in the second transfer portal window. Go ahead, put it in the comments below. If you're listening on like the Apple podcasts or whatever, go ahead, leave a review. If you want to tweet at me, go ahead. It's WNS_Brandon. But go ahead. But the third position I'm talking about is tight end. This is a position where when I last spoke about this and I said positions that I think Florida should target, I put tight end on there. And I said in that episode that I think Florida wants to, and I think they should. I think Florida wants to go for a tight end because they spent the first transfer portal window speaking with, it was like 6 tight ends or something like in that range. And by speaking with, I mean actually speaking with, not just like, hey, bud, how you doing? So I do think that tight end was a position that going into the first portal window, they identified as, hey, we should look into this position. We should try to find a little bit of help here depth-wise. And since then, since the start of the first transfer portal window, the only thing that's changed in the tight end room is Jonathan Odom left officially. Dante Zanders left officially. Keon Zipper returned officially. And Gavin Hill moved from defensive line to tight end. Those were the only changes that happened in the tight end room. None of those changes were really significant, right? You could argue Keon Zipper returning was, sure. But there, like if you were looking into the transfer portal for a tight end, do any of those things change? Like, has anything changed there, really? Because even Keon Zipper returning, you knew he would. So when you were planning on adding a tight end in the first transfer portal window, you knew you were adding a tight end anyway, even with Keon Zipper returning. Or you knew that you were trying to add a tight end, even with Keon Zipper returning. So basically, it comes down to, does moving Gavin Hill from defensive line to tight end change your plan to want to add another tight end to the room? Because personally, I don't think it should at all. You moved a freshman from reserve defensive lineman to reserve tight end. That's really what happened. You added another body to the room, sure. But really what happened was that. And Amir Jackson signed. But again, is that really relevant to the position that they're specifically talking about? Because Keon Zipper is not, and Amir Jackson is not. Not because they're not tight ends. They are tight ends, but they are the pass-catching tight ends. They are the receiving tight ends. They're going to be backing up, most likely, Arlis Boardingham, unless Zipper gets the spot and Arlis is tight end 2 there, but I don't think that's the case. I think it'll be Arlis, then Zip, then Amir Jackson. So I don't think that they have any impact really on the inline tight end spot behind Hayden Hansen. But right now, you have Hayden Hansen there. You have Tony Livingston there. You have Gavin Hill there. And that's pretty much your inline tight end group. You lost more than you added, just in terms of quantity, not quality, but in terms of quantity, you lost more than you added. I see nothing that happened this past offseason, this from the beginning of the first transfer portal window to today, April 9th, 2024. I see nothing that happened that changed, oh, we don't need to look at inline tight end anymore. It was a thing they looked at in the first transfer portal window. Nothing significant happened in that spot. And again, I want to make this abundantly clear. Inline tight end is only a need for depth, right? Like you're just swinging for experienced depth at the inline tight end spot. Because right now, your only experience there is Keon Zipper, Hayden Hansen, Arlis Boardingham. That's it. And two of those guys had no experience going into last season and gained all of the experience that they had in that last season. So even then, they are relatively experienced to the room, but in general, they've got 1 year of playing college football. If you could add a guy who, again, is just a primary blocking tight end that can just give you a little bit of breathing room there. Because again, I'll knock on wood, I've mentioned this every time. Right now, when you look at that inline tight end spot, you've got Hayden Hansen starting, and he played the overwhelming majority of snaps last year, which I do think is an indicator for how they felt about Dante Sanders, that he didn't even rotate in for the huge majority end of the season. So you have Hayden Hansen as the inline tight end starting, and he played the overwhelming majority of snaps. That means that if you can add a guy that you actually trust to back him up, if Tony Livingston becomes that, then he becomes that. Then you limit the you limit the risk of injury there. And also, if there is an injury, your team's not as screwed. And so for me, I think that that's why they will look at tight end. I think that's why they should look at tight end. But again, you're looking for in-depth tight ends. That's what you need, I think. Depth inline tight ends. Interesting. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country and NFL 33. And as always, I will see you all next time.